Once again, it's Darla D and Jimmy Z. I'm Jimmy Z over here in California.
And this is Darla D in Southern Arizona.
And hello, everybody. We're going to talk about Thanksgiving. It's just a couple of days away. Darla, you told me that you had some kind of article that talked about Thanksgiving.
I came across this. I'm laughing because the picture in this article has a whole bunch of turkeys, and one is kind of flying up over the others, and they're all looking at it like it's a crazy turkey. And it kind of makes me think about how we're all kind of turkeys sometimes during the holidays when it comes to talking politics and our belief system with some of our family members who, or maybe they're the turkey. I did hear on Jay Leno that the turkey this year opted out of the pictures because of President Obama's approval rating is so low.
Yeah.
So the turkey didn't want to be seen in pictures with Obama.
Wow. Okay.
Okay, well, the title of this article is If You Must Talk Politics at Thanksgiving, Here's How. So it's 10 unsatisfying rules for disagreeing with friends and family over the holidays. So all of us have, it sounds like my dogs are going to be disagreeable. They didn't like that topic, talking about turkeys. Excuse them. Okay, so, Thanksgiving, Christmas, any holiday, you get together with family and friends. And if you're, lucky, fortunate, you may all be on pretty much the same page. Fortunately, in my family, most of us are on the same page. But sometimes I get a few of our family members who show up, and we're on pretty opposite sides. And that can be pretty uncomfortable. And sometimes even we get a little heated, and then my mom or dad will have to calm us all down.
Yeah, I've gone through that.
I don't really want to do that.
It's no fun.
No, it's no fun. And of course, because we're with our family, what do? We tend to be more boisterous and, forthcoming and blunt with all the things that we have to say. And so, that just leads to sort of a disastrous Thanksgiving, and we kind of get, beyond what the whole idea of Thanksgiving is about. Mm-hmm. So anyway, I thought we'd just go over these rules and we can talk about them. Does that sound like a good idea? Yeah.
I'm looking forward to hearing what the rules are. Some of them I might not be able to obey at all.
And I have a feeling the listeners are going to be in the same boat. But, let's maybe one of these, we can try one or two of these this year. Maybe it'll help.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. All right. So, first of all, it warns that this could be very hard work. So, just, keep in mind that you may have to work a little bit in order to follow these rules.
No question
about it. Number one is be open to the possibility that you're wrong. Seriously.
Yeah, right. Me.
Yeah, that might be a hard one for you to swallow, Jimmy. We might start with another one for you to work.
Rule number one is it's just not going to happen. Yeah. That's why, when I'm in a situation with family, not so much, but I've been invited to friends' places for Thanksgiving on occasion. And there's always, when you're at a friendly location where you got friends from all different types of groups of people, there is going to be disagreement if politics come up. And I will often just keep my mouth shut because there's no reason for me to make my guests go through any kind of conniptions over, whatever kind of argument I'm going to get involved in.
Did you really say that you just keep your mouth shut, Jimmy Z?
Yeah, I'm actually...
I am shocked.
I am actually very sensitive to friends in homes where, like with my family, I'm always willing to give my opinion because we're family and they're used to it and they know who I am. But when I'm with friends and I'm at a table and there's somebody who voices an opinion that's completely opposite of what I believe, and I know that there's some people at the table who agree with me and other people at the table who don't, I will often just err on the side of caution and keep the peace because, people whose home that is, they don't want to see a knockdown, drag-out argument at their table.
No. And so this is good. If you can't concede or admit that possibly you're wrong, then maybe the best thing is to just keep your mouth shut. So that's a good way to end that one.
Yeah.
Number 2, approach the conversation with the purpose of better understanding one another's views, not proving to your relative that you are right and they are wrong. Now, I don't know about you, but that's probably a big source of contention with a lot of people in those relationships and discussing, because everyone wants to be right and they want to prove that they're right, and that's where sometimes the tension begins to build.
Yep. Well, I'm going to ignore that. I do think that it is very important for us to understand what makes the opposition tick, what makes the person who disagrees with us think the way they do. The unfortunate thing is that, you get into arguments. I'm not going to get into a whole thing here right now, but somebody who's defending Obama will simply say, no, he never said that. Like if you say Obama said that you get to keep your doctor if you like your doctor, and they'll simply look you straight in the eye and say, Obama never said that. Well, you can't discuss anything with a person like that. But if you get into, say, an argument about the death penalty or abortion or homosexuality, you can usually try to figure out what makes this person think the way they do, and that gives you an opportunity to explain why you believe the way you do, and a mutual understanding can sometimes lead to someone changing their mind.
It's true, and I have found that one of the biggest problems that I see amongst conservatives versus liberals and vice versa is the very fact that no one wants to understand the other side when they get into conversations. I see it on the internet, I see it on Facebook and different forums where they just immediately start calling names and so forth. And you've got one, like the liberals, for example, calling the right names, and then the right is trying to explain where they're coming from, but the left doesn't care. And so it's like, you got to get to the point where you sort of drop the left, right, and just talk as people. And when you can talk as people, like I talked to someone on our Flip the Senate page the other day. They had sent a message, started off, it was a very nasty message. And I just wrote back as Flip the House, or Flip the Senate, Flip the Senate, as the page name. So he didn't know who I was.
Right.
But I just wrote back and said something like, well, he said something along the lines of, blow me or something like that. And I was just like, yeah. And I was just like, wow. How do you know? Maybe I'm male, maybe I'm female. How do you know? I mean, that's quite a request.
I don't think somebody who says that really.
I just make light of it.
I don't think somebody who says that really cares whether you're female or male.
But here's the thing. He wrote back and kind of laughed, and then he said, "No, I just don't like what you guys stand for," and that opened a conversation. And I said, "What is it that we stand for that you don't like?" And then he said, well, you shut down the government and you are doing this and you're doing, and everything he brought up to me, I could then bring him facts back. And I said, I don't think that what you're telling me is, as a matter of fact, I know what you're telling me is not factual, but would you like to know the truth? And he says, well, what's the truth? And so we talked for like 30 minutes on there. And the last thing he said to me was, I really want to talk to you more and learn more from you.
Huh. Wow.
And I was like, wow, he was a young guy too, like probably 17, 18 years old, maybe 20, I don't know, somewhere in there. But I was just like, wow, because at first all he was telling me was what the typical talking heads and the MSNs and all these guys say. He was just repeating their standard lines, and I was confronting him on each of those things and discussing it with him in a way that any person would discuss with someone that they care about.
Right.
And so I think that's part of it. If you go into it that you do care and you want to know more about why they feel the way they do, or if they say, that they make a decision or a determination that we're a certain way or that you're a certain way or what you believe is a certain way, then I want to question them. Well, what is it exactly that you believe that I am? What is it that you believe that I believe? And because that right there really kind of shuts them down sometimes, because then they don't really know what it is that they think that you believe.
Well,
they can't really articulate it.
If you get somebody who can answer the question about what they believe you think, then you can usually get somewhere, because a lot of liberals will never even attempt to answer that question.
Right. Okay, so number 3 is, before you focus on any point of disagreement, ask questions of the person to figure out why they think the way they do about the subject at hand. I think we just talked about that.
Yeah, that's about the same, kind of the same thing we were just talking about, that being open to getting questions answered will usually end up going in the same going the same way in the opposite direction.
What won't work is to hear what they have to say and then stand up and say, well, you're a freaking idiot, and walk away.
Yeah. No, that's not going to work.
That's not going to work. So, folks, I know that all of you have tried that at some point.
Oh, yeah.
Don't do it. Don't go there with your family, okay? Don't do it. Step away from that argument. All right. So number 4 is emphasize points of agreement. And then it says, if there are any.
Yeah, well, you can usually find some kind of agreement. Like an example for me is that I don't think it's a good idea for pro-life protesters to gather on sidewalks in front of women's clinics and scream angrily at women who are walking into or driving into the clinic. I don't think that does any good. And so, well, there's going to be conservatives who disagree with me on that, and that's fine. But that is a point where I can get some common ground with somebody who is pro-choice, and then we can start to have a conversation.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no one wants to be screamed at, and if you scream at them, they're probably not going to listen to you, and they're going to do what they want to do anyway, and you're just going to make them more angry and upset.
Right.
So the best way to teach anyone is to get to them in a way that makes sense, it's calm, it's, you don't want to yell at them to get them to do anything. And plus, that's like bullying, if you ask me,
Yeah, it
it's
is.
intimidation
It is
tactics.
Sure.
So, I mean, there might as well be the Black Panthers holding this sign out and, in front of the polling places. I mean, it's the same kind of tactic.
Yeah, I agree.
Okay. So, number 5 is give them room to agree with your arguments without having to concede that their arguments are stupid or feeling as if they lost the exchange and you won.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Mm-hmm.
That makes a lot of sense, because it's the losing that hurts worse.
Yeah.
Because nobody wants to end up losing the argument.
Yeah, I don't want to be a loser.
One of the things I really don't like about arguments is this idea that we have to agree to disagree. It's kind of a namby-pamby saying, and I've never really liked it. But finding points of agreement and then being able to say, hey, you've got a point there, is much more preferable to, well, you just lost the argument, pal.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Boy, how does that feel, huh?
Yeah.
Go have another piece of pumpkin pie and think on that.
Yeah.
Maybe some eggnog with some whiskey in it or something. Maybe that'll make you feel better.
Yeah, you're going to need a drink now, pal, after losing.
It's going to need a hot toddy or something, But you're absolutely right, and this is correct in that. For example, this young man that I was speaking to the other night, at one point I said to him, well, when he was explaining to me, one of the things he hates is all the arguing from both sides. And I wrote back and I said, I feel exactly the same way. I do not like all the arguing from both sides of the Republicans and the Democrats and what's going on. And he's like, well, I think both of them have a lot of issues. And I said, and I agree with that too. And he goes, and I don't feel like they're following the Constitution. And I said, I don't either. And I said, look, see, we have already, there's 3 things that we agree on.
Yeah.
I said, I believe that there's a lot more things that we agree on than that we disagree.
Most Americans hate it when Congress is having a big battle. Now, I think that that's part of politics, and that I would like to see a few more battles, because I want to see my side fighting for what's right. But most Americans can't stand it. They would rather capitulate. They would rather have one side give in than to keep up this argument. That was one of the big problems with shutting down the government. It wasn't the shutdown itself. They just can't stand all the bickering. And it's because nobody likes bickering in their own lives. They don't like bickering at the office, and they don't like bickering at home, and they don't like reading about bickering in Washington, D.C., and yet they will sit there and watch Survivor or any number of these the television shows, the reality TV shows where people argue and bitch and fight and
bicker the whole time.
The whole time.
Yes, I know. But that's different. That's different.
Yeah, it's entertainment.
It's entertainment. Okay, so that was number 5. Number 6 is, rather than harping on a particular flaw in their preferred policy, I know that's really hard, ask questions that force them to confront it. I agree killing all the sharks would make it safer for surfers, but what about the creatures that sharks eat? How would you make sure their populations don't explode? Seriously, how would you handle that?
Wow. That's really tough. I want you to read the first part of that again.
Okay.
Number 6.
So rather than harping on a particular flaw in their preferred policy, ask questions that force them to confront it.
That is really tough for me because as soon as I see the chink in their armor, that's where I'm going. That's where I always go.
I know that about you.
Because somebody could be telling me the sky is blue and the mountains are covered in snow and the car has 4 wheels and all these things, one thing after the other, that's exactly right. And then one statement, it's pitiful. It's really something.
Obama loves America.
Yeah, I mean, I that's where I'm going to go. So I really do need to. That number 6 there, I need to think about. I really do, because it's a very important way to keep the conversation going and perhaps have somebody understand the opposing view.
Right. I agree. So number 7 is, don't bother trying to score debating points, Jimmy Z. Especially when you both know that's all they are.
I don't like this list at all. Because this is not just a Thanksgiving list. This is, and really, it's not a Thanksgiving list for anyone. This is a list of ways to keep a conversation going. We can talk about it at Thanksgiving, but this applies 365 days a year. I hate this list.
I know. I didn't think you would like it much. And I think a lot of people won't like it. There's points that we can agree on, and there's points that we're just going to be like, you know what, that's like, asking me not to get up in the morning and brush my teeth. I mean, you know.
Yeah.
It's not going to happen, so.
No, well, this is...
All right, so that was number 7.
This is great. This is a lot of food for thought for me. I must
number 7
admit.
was, don't bother trying to score debating points, especially when you both know that's all they are. So keep that in mind, folks. Number 8, remember that they know stuff that you don't, just as you know stuff that they don't. But here's the problem with that. The stuff they know, they don't know.
Oh, that's a good point. Yeah. The stuff they know is not true.
That's it.
Like
a lot of it.
Global warming. The stuff they know is false. The information was contrived. So
or for example, they want to talk about how the Democrats are for civil rights and equality and all this stuff, and I say, wait a minute, hold on here a second. Oh, and we're the party of bigots and racists. And I say, wait a minute. Yeah. It was the Republicans that voted in majority and the Democrats against for abolishing slavery, for women's rights to vote, blacks' rights to vote, and the Civil Rights Act. It was LBJ, Lyndon B. Johnson, who voted for the Welfare Act, who basically put or keeps the black community on the welfare plantation.
Yeah.
So... But they'll tell me that that's not true. That's not true. Or there was a switch. It was at that point that the party switched parties. I love that one.
Yeah, that.
They
well, look,
sides.
There are flaws in this number on that list, but it is true that that some people know something that we might not know. However, there are a lot of misguided preconceptions on the left that I just don't see. I realize that people on the right have some misconceptions that are not true, but it's not part of their standard rhetoric. It's not part of their talking points time after time.
Yeah.
All right, number 9.
Remember that lots of intelligent, good-hearted people share their position, and lots of dense jerks share your position.
That's true.
Because that's true of almost every position.
Yeah, that's true. I go after some conservatives from time to time, and I also know that I have a lot of musician friends here in Los Angeles, and most of them are liberal, and they are some of the warmest, sweetest people that I know in my life, and I like them a lot, and they are genuine friends. But politically, we disagree.
Well, just the other day, this is in reference to the second part of that, the lots of dense jerks. There are a lot of those in the movement too. There's people in our movement who, well, I don't really call out any names, but they kind of follow a certain politician with the initials RP.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm trying to be nice at Thanksgiving here, but
sure.
They want to make us out to be the bad guys.
And isn't it amazing, since you brought up RP, isn't it amazing what a more well-rounded politician his son is?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
I really do like Rand Paul.
He's a great guy. So, but yeah, just remember that, lots of intelligent, good-hearted people are going to share your position, and lots of dense jerks will share your position too. So we just have to remember that.
Yeah, that's a great one.
Good people are on both sides.
Yep.
There are good people on both sides. And then number 10 is, and Jimmy Z, you're going to love this one. This goes in line a little bit with what you said earlier. Listen more than you talk.
I don't understand. That does not compute.
Me no comprehend.
Yeah, I mean, that's what I do as I talk. But yeah, I mean,
I have a hard time with that too. So.
You really do have to do that. You really have to keep that in mind. And I'm speaking for myself here, because in the course of a conversation, and this goes not just with politics, but with personal issues between man and wife, a man who really wants to understand what his wife is talking about and what makes her tick needs to be able to listen more than he speaks. Absolutely.
Well, and I think in the Proverbs and throughout the Bible, there's numerous cases where it references that, and taming our tongue and keeping our tongue, in our mouths basically, and not, talking and listening more. Like, what do they say? People say you have 2 ears and 1 mouth, that's so that you listen twice as much than you talk.
You know what? Yeah, that's true. And I'm thinking about this politically. If you allow the person that you disagree with to speak more than you do, and you actually give them the impression, even if it's not true, if you give them the impression that you're listening and considering what they say, then that person is going to be more open to whatever you say.
Exactly. That's it right there. This article does say, of course, most people who argue about politics at Thanksgiving aren't actually interested in understanding how others think or learning anything or even persuading anyone. They just like to argue.
Yeah,
so basically it's saying don't be competitive about politics. Don't go out of your way to try and prove that they're all wrong. And, we need to remember the reason for the seasons that we're in right now. And Thanksgiving, as much as this country is upside down right now, the fact remains that I have a roof over my head. I have a job. I have a husband that loves me and a great family. My husband is employed. We're not suffering. We're making it. We have food on our table. Those are all things to be grateful for. And we still live in a country that's free. And that right there, to me, means more than anything. Do we have to continue working and preserving that? Absolutely.
Yeah, and we do need to remember that even though we believe that we have a problem with freedom and liberty today, we are still, I believe, and I know there's, you maybe have seen these lists that say that there are other countries on the planet that are more free or have more liberty than we do. And if people believe that, they should move there, because I still believe that in the United States, even with the problems we have today, that we are more free and we have more liberty and more ability to change what's happening here than anywhere else in the world.
Yes. And it's a wonderful thing. And we still, I think, have one of the greatest countries on this earth. And I think over the holidays, over Thanksgiving especially, because that's the one that comes up this week, Thursday, we need to really take a step back, especially for those of us who are really engaged every day, because this is what sort of permeates from us, is this talk about politics and where we stand on things. And people know that. And some of them probably, because we're so passionate, really don't want to get up close and personal with us right now. And so remember that there's two sides to every story. And even if their story's wrong, maybe you should step back and let them tell it. You know?
Yeah. Well,
in a sort of Thanksgiving way.
Since we're talking about Thanksgiving, I did want to read one line from George Washington's Thanksgiving Proclamation, and it's something that everyone
Awesome.
should read, and many people have read this, but this struck me. Somebody on television this morning was talking about this, where George Washington wrote, "Whereas it is the duty of all nations to acknowledge the providence of Almighty God." Now, this was George Washington saying that the United States was going to acknowledge God and thank God for our many blessings. But he said it was the duty of all nations to acknowledge the providence of Almighty God. He believed at the time, and this is something that's almost foreign to us now, that all nations around the world should be acknowledging the God of the Bible. And I think that this is a very important thing for us as Christians, as conservatives, as Americans, to acknowledge God. And this is what Thanksgiving is about. You know, a lot of people talk about being thankful, but it's kind of this nondescript concept of being thankful for things we have, but it's not really pointed in the direction of God. And there's everything that we have: the chair I'm sitting in, the bed I slept in, the roof over my head, the money in my bank account. I am thankful for these things because God saw fit to hand them over to me.
Amen. That right there is what it's all about. And every day, God provides His grace and His mercy for us to operate, to work, and to do the things that we do. He provides. He makes provisions, and He does make our pathways straight, especially if we seek Him out and talk to Him about it. I just want to say that from Patriot Action Network and Grassfire Nation, that our team wishes all of you a very, very happy Thanksgiving. And it is my hope and my prayer that even though we laughed and joked a lot about these 10 rules, that you will stop and think before you speak, and that you will keep that spirit of what Thanksgiving is about, being thankful for our family members, even if they aren't quite where you want them to be politically. Give them a chance, and maybe we can turn this country around.
I couldn't add anything to that. Have a very happy Thanksgiving, everyone.
God bless.
She's Darla D, and I'm Jimmy Z, and we'll be back next time. Darla D and Jimmy Z.